Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a chance to do some networking. I am going to kick us off with our first session. Actually, before we get into that, maybe we can use the emojis. Let me know how the networking went. I liked it a lot. I'm going to give it a thumbs up here. Yeah, it's great. It seems like a lot of people enjoyed it. Great. Again, I'm Adam Carreri from Benchmark. I'll be kicking off our speaker sessions today with our first speaker, Mark Coots. Mark Coots is a sought after speaker on financial literacy. He has been interviewed by national media such as the Globe and Mail and BNN. He is an author and a former award-winning broadcaster. I've known Mark for over 14 years, and I always enjoy hearing Mark speak when it comes to finances, and I'm sure you will too. So with that, let's welcome Mark to the stage, please.
Adam, great to be here.
Hi, Mark. How are you? Did you get a chance to do any networking, Mark?
I did not. I was getting all set, and I thought, you know what? I'm all ready to go. I've tested my microphone, but this is technology. Welcome to technology in a pandemic. Everybody's managing.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. We'll get through it. But Mark, I thought we get started here. A lot of people are interested in money and get in investments. When we think about 2020, it actually was a pretty good year for investors. It didn't start off that way with the wake of the pandemic. The first quarter for investors rather, stock markets were down. Then came that bounce back sort of in the second quarter. All in all, was a pretty rocky year. What would you say investors can take away from this experience?
Well, 2020 was this wonderfully poignant microcosm of how the market functions over the long term, and it had all the good and all the bad of what one sees in an economic cycle, all compressed into less than a year. You're absolutely right, Adam. I think people were shocked, and people are still getting their annual statements from 2020. A lot of people were too afraid to open them. But for most investors, you're right. It has been a very good 12 months looking backward. Really completely opposite to what one might have expected heading into the year. If you could have predicted, what would be the outcome as an investor during a global pandemic, a once in a century pandemic, I don't think you would have seen a lot of people saying, I think I'm going to make money. And yet people did. And so I think the takeaways that you have to remember, and this comes back to the fundamentals of investing. Number one, you can't time the market. It is just totally unpredictable. And I think we remember, I'm a parent, I think we all remember looking back, and I think March break in the province of Ontario said, well, we're going to let students stay home for a week. And I think a lot of parents thought, well, sure, we'll do that for a week. We'll be back right after March break. Well, here we are 10 months later, still doing virtual learning. And so that's an example of the uncontrollable. And when the market plunged, it plunged. So that first quarter, as you said, was pretty ugly. But then we see another uncontrollable event, which was government support, which brought the market back up. And that was central banks and federal governments putting in place emergency response programs. And as a result, all ships rise with the tide. And a lot of investors did well if they stayed put. So that's lesson number two is, if you're going to try and time the market, it's a lot easier to get out than it is to know when to get in. And so we had a couple of clients who panicked in February and March, pulled money out. The problem is now you're parked on the sidelines. When do you get back in? And it was probably at the worst possible time emotionally for investors when you should have got back in, when it was at the bottom. But when something's at the bottom, emotions tend to take over. People think they're going to go, things will get even worse. And so they wait. And if you wait and you hesitate on the sidelines, you miss that rebound. You have to be there for the rebound. In fact, all the research shows that if you don't stay invested fully in the market, ride out these rough spots, you're going to lose out. So typically, if you miss the best 10 days of the year on the market, year over year over year, over a period of a quarter century, you're going to cut your gains in half. And so out of 365 days, you missed the best 10. And so that's why you can't try and time that market. I think another lesson people learned is that risk is relative. Risk goes down as your investment time horizon goes up. So obviously, if you were keeping money parked on the sidelines to buy a house last year, that's great. If you had it in the market, wouldn't have been so good. But if you're an investor saving for retirement, which is 10, 20, 30 years away, last year is now in the rearview mirror. It's really just kind of a blip on the horizon. I'd say the other takeaway is to stay diversified, because last year it was technology stocks, especially US large companies, the Microsofts, the Amazons of the world, that really drove the stock market upward. But if you were focused on, for example, Canadian energy, you would have missed out on that. So you want to stay diversified geographically and also by sector.
Yeah, no, you're right, Mark. And one of your first points always brings you back to one of the old sayings, and when it comes to investing, is just stay the course, right?
Yep.
Not time to try to time the market jumping in and out. And you can see last year we were exposed to a lot to stock market risk and how that works. But what other risks should investors be thinking about now?
Well, let's reflect on 2020, and I think that'll give you an example. Let me ask a question of the audience, and they can give us the thumbs up or to let us know their response. At some point last year, were you at all concerned about your health or the health of a loved one?
Absolutely.
There you go. Not a surprise, right? But that brings me to the first risk that people don't talk about that is tied to your finances, health risk. Right? That if something goes wrong, I'm sure people were worried last year, understandably, but well, what if I get COVID? What if my spouse gets COVID and they're the only income earner in the family? Or what if a loved one gets COVID and I have to take time off work to care for them? What's the impact on our family financially? Or I don't have disability insurance. What if we have to, dig into savings? And so all of this played into people's fears last year, and it was all tied to health. And so that's one of the big risks. You need to try and make sure in your overall financial plan that you have a safety net in place through insurance, whether it's disability, health insurance, long-term care. You need to make sure you got that safety net. Could be through your group plan, could be individually. That's one risk. I would say another big one, which didn't get a lot of attention last year because everybody's focused on COVID, everybody's focused on the market. But if you're not an aggressive investor, let's say you're a conservative investor, you're easing into retirement, you're going to want to protect your money. And the safe way traditionally to do that was to put your money into what's called fixed income or bonds, and they generate interest. Well, that's great when the interest rates were high, but they're not high anymore. And so, it used to be that people could get 4% on a GIC, 5% on a bond. You're getting below 1% on both of those now. It's not working. And so as a result, that's a big risk. Declining interest rates have really made it tough on conservative investors looking for anywhere to place their money that it would be safe. It's actually now possible to lose money with a conservative portfolio because interest rates in some countries have actually gone negative. So that's your second risk. Your third risk, got to keep an eye on this one, inflation. People don't talk about it a lot again because inflation is low right now. Historically, it's been around 2%. You always want to make sure that your investment portfolio grows above 2%. You want to stay ahead of that. Otherwise, you're losing money year over year. You're losing purchasing power. But you can't grow above inflation if you're not invested at least some degree in the market because of low interest rates. Final risk, I'd say that, again, doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's happening. It's a demographic shift we're seeing all over the world. Longevity. So in 2019, the British Census Bureau, their equivalent of Stats Canada, announced that for a baby born in 2019, they had a 50% chance of living to 100. That's a long time. And people don't want to postpone their retirements. So they're going to need the money to retire. And it's going to be a longer and longer retirement. So when you're thinking about your financial plan, you've got to think about longevity risk. You got to make sure that your money doesn't run out before you do.
Absolutely, yeah. And when we think about all these risks, and especially those heading to retirement, what can they do at this point? If they're nearing closer, getting a little closer to that retirement age, what can they do today?
Well, there's some obvious steps. Have an emergency buffer. I think, if you really need an example of why one can benefit from having a backup plan, it's 2020, right? Sure. And so you need to have that emergency buffer. A great place for that is a TFSA. You may want to keep 1 or 2 or 3 months salary there if you can. Keep it in cash. Don't worry about it not being in the market. That's not the objective. The objective is that you have that safety net if you need it due to something uncontrollable. If you're heading into retirement, I want you to think of it this way. The way to protect your assets in retirement, think of your assets as a pie. And I want to give yourself a slice of that pie. And I'm going to use an acronym, PIE, PIE, which is protect your income in an emergency. And what you do there, it's very simple. Look at your total retirement. Take a slice that represents maybe 2 years worth of your projected income needs in retirement and park that in cash. Don't put it in the stock market. Don't put it in bonds. Park it in cash. That way, if the market does what it did last year and you still need to generate income in retirement, you've got a 2-year backup plan. You've got that money set aside to provide 2 years worth of income, and you can leave the rest of your portfolio invested. It'll ride it out. The average recession is 17 months. You've got 2 years worth. So that's a great way to just, a simple strategy that you can use so that you don't lock down your entire RSP into something low interest when you turn 65. That's not smart. You need to have gas in the tank. You need it to still grow above inflation. You need a little bit set aside for those emergencies. So PIE, protect your income in retirement.
That's excellent advice. I'll remember that, Mark. Again, when we speak, I love it. I always take down notes and remember things. We have about 2 minutes before we move on to our next session, but I just wanted to sort of look, moving forward now. What trends, investment trends, do you see coming down for 2021 now that the vaccines have come out, et cetera?
Okay, I'll give you'll see the answer when I ask a question. How many people watching and listening today have embraced a new technology in the past 12 months? It could be a way they communicate. So, there you go. See?
Right here.
I've got 85-year-old clients who've mastered Zoom. I've got people who've purchased a webcam for the first time. I've got people who now have a DoorDash account. They've got Amazon Prime. They're e-commerce. Okay. This is going to continue. Obviously, we're not going back exactly the way we were. That pace of technological change is going to continue. The pace of digital change. Technology, the entire sector had a banner year last year. I don't think we're going to see it quite the same, but we're still going to see some decent growth going forward for those companies that are really disrupting industries, like a DoorDash or Amazon. There's more packages arrive at my front door because I got two kids and like all I ever see is boxes at the door. We got more cardboard recycling than we've ever had. And it's because it's a change in how they're shopping. The other thing I think we've seen a tipping point for, and a good example of this happened less than 24 hours ago. Less than 24 hours ago, the U.S. killed the Keystone XL pipeline. And they killed it because of our climate. And I think we've reached a tipping point where sustainable investing, the notion of investing in what will improve the quality of our planet, clean energy, that is here to stay. And I think you're going to see a strong shift to that. We're already seeing a lot more talk, a lot more products, a lot more investors saying, look, I want to put my money where my morals are. I don't just want to think carefully about how I spend my money, and buy an electric vehicle and be a good recycler. I want to insist that where I'm investing my money is helping the planet, is making a positive difference. And so we're seeing a strong shift towards what's called SRI investing, socially responsible investing, or ESG investing, environment, social, governance. Those trends are here to stay.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I personally can speak to you about finances forever. I truly enjoy it. Fortunately, we need to move on to our next session, but I do want to thank you for joining us. I hope everyone enjoyed Mark Coutts. If we can all give a round of applause or emoji round of applause for Mark. Thank you again for coming, Mark. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Adam.
Our next session will be with Giorgio Folagati and Lisa Stam. I'd like to welcome Giorgio to the stage.
Hey, Adam, thanks so much for the intro. Mark Coutts as well. Always a pleasure to hear from you, VP of Group Savings for Benchmark. I'm super excited. Again, my name is Giorgio, Senior Consultant with Benchmark. So happy to see so many faces here, ready to join us, keep this thing moving. I see Nora, I see Samantha, I see Cleo. Thanks so much again. Keep engaging with us in the chat. We definitely want to hear from you. This is a collaborative effort here with everybody joining us. I have the pleasure of introducing Lisa Stam, who is the founder of Spring Law, a virtual law firm advising exclusively on workplace legal issues for employers and executives. She practices all aspects of employment, labor, privacy, and human rights law with a particular interest in legal issues arising from technology in the workplace, something super prevalent. Lisa frequently blogs and speaks on the impacts, risks, opportunities of social media and technology issues inside and outside of the workplace, which is a very blurred line these days. Lisa graduated from Dalhousie Law School after completing an undergraduate degree in medieval history at the University of Toronto. Please welcome to the stage, Lisa Stamm. Virtual claps, please. Just there you are. Hey, Lisa.
How are you, Giorgio?
Doing very well. Thank you so much for joining us. And before we get started, I have a simple curiosity. Can you give us some context in your transfer from medieval history to law?
Well, 1215 is the Magna Carta, which sort of started democracy and is the first big contract. So there is a lot of our legal system is rooted there. And then the other practical reason is, what do you do with a medieval degree besides go to law school? So off I went to law school.
I love it. I love that there is some overlap there with medieval history and law. It's definitely something that was performed in a different way back then. We won't get into that.
Yeah.
Before we get deep into our conversation around managing and protecting a stressed out workplace, I want to again lean into our audience here today. This is something that is super relatable, I imagine, for a lot of our HR practitioners and business leaders. I encourage our attendees, please drop some questions and comments in the chat box. I know we already had a few of them come in, which was awesome to see. We definitely want to hear from you and make this an open conversation for everybody. But I think I'll kick things off here and start with a pretty obvious statement that COVID-19 has had a huge impact on mental health. Whether you're at home, whether you're in the workplace, pretty much every aspect of your life. With this, we have seen an increase in stress and disability leaves related to mental health. So what are some of the ways employers can address mental health in the workplace simply?
It's I tried to get some questions going in the chat, so I echo your comments. Go ahead and add lots of stuff into the chat. We will it makes it more of a conversation, and that makes for a more interesting presentation. And two of the questions so far were about addiction and about what are some of the big issues that we're seeing all the time. And stress-related issues, stress leave, harassment claims, they're all related, and it's all 2020 was a great big pile of stress, and especially for the frontline workers. We represent a few businesses that are in the medical field, so family health teams, and they're really stressed out, and the managers are stressed out, and the employees are stressed out, and no human behaves on their best behavior when they're stressed out. So it's alive and real. And then you add in homeschooling to all of that. So anyone with little kids at home, mine are old enough to just do TikTok all day long. So, I'm good to go. But anyone with toddlers and younger kids, it's there's a lot on the go right now.
Mm-hmm. How do you find employers are addressing that? What does that look like? Is that, open emails, open conversations, simple texts, Zoom calls? How is that sort of being structured, and what would be really the recommendation around that conversation, from protecting your workplace perspective?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of good creative ideas, right? People are trying to figure out ways to keep their employees engaged in a virtual environment, which is a deep pivot for some organizations. For the organizations where that's not possible, dental offices or anyone in healthcare generally, I think people are muddling through it and not really thriving, to be honest. I hope that 2021 is going to look a lot different. I certainly felt like the internet was happier last night. I was so excited about Kamala, by the way. I just want to talk about how we're in this exciting new world for American politics, at least, with having our first woman VP. But there is a positive energy coming into 2021, I think, in some ways. But we're such a far way off from everyone being vaccinated and being able to return to, there's no normal anymore, but return to at least some continuity. The rate and pace of change has been so hard on employers, and especially small businesses where you don't have a whole change management department. It's your frontline supervisors who are having to implement changes. So it's been a long go. So I don't think people are thriving in some workplaces.
Mm-hmm. And I guess on that note as well, with the ever-changing market and regulatory bodies, we should make note that this is conversations happening on January 21st, 2021. So
Yeah.
things can change that quickly, where next week or the week after, some of these resources that we can share, live and also, online, it won't be the same at that point. But you mentioned, and there was a question, I think, in the chat earlier that, what were some of the biggest changes, let's say, from 2019 to 2020? I guess from an inbound perspective on your end, we named some of the obvious ones, but has there been an area that you would like, individuals to focus a little bit more now post 2020, and what did that change look like, pre and after?
I think what we're going to see, what we saw a huge increase with over 2020 was just basic questions on layoff and terminations, and very distressed, freaked out employers who just are not sure how to handle such a new situation, and feel the guilt and weight of being, not being able to meet payroll, and terrified about where their income's coming or the revenue's coming down the pipe. That's all still alive and well. We're in a very tricky economy still, but I think we're a little bit past that, where people are no one's embracing change like it's fun, but they're accepting that there's a fast rate of change. So what we're seeing now, what our office is seeing a lot of, is just lots of complaints of harassment and stress in the workplace, and how to deal with leaves, how to deal with employees that aren't thriving. And that could be that they just can't handle the volume because it's a work from home environment, and they've got little kids at home, and they're being pulled in 1,000 directions. I think, who was it that was it Leo that raised the question about substance abuse? I think that's a great point. That it was Leo. The substance abuse has come up as a real issue when you have people working from home, and there's no public accountability anymore. And so we certainly have dealt with clients where they know that the lockdowns are any of their employees that have had addiction issues. It's a real struggle, and they've had to at least one client that I can think of off the top of my head where they had to really deal with it fairly assertively, and get her back into addiction counseling and rehab. And so how do you protect your company from all that, right? On the one hand, there's the HR and morale part of it all, and productivity. As a lawyer, what we're trying to help our employer clients is how do you CYA your organization, because you can't see some of those issues, and so until you hear about it virtually, you're not able to observe some of their in-person behavior. But our law firm has been a virtual law firm since we started in 2017. So there's definitely lots of ways in the modern world of technology to run a virtual company, but it does require a lot of check-ins and baked in moments where you can just assess people's temperature and see what's going on.
And is there a sort of magic formula to perform these check-ins? I guess everyone's situation and workplace looks different. Some are still in person. You mentioned some healthcare clinics and practitioners who get to still see people face to face. But then those that are completely remote, is there a preferred method, from, again, protecting your employees, but also protecting your company? Is that email? Is that video, recorded video, text messages? Is there a magic answer to that?
I think one of the magic ingredients is to talk to people, and not just email or text. It has to be, ideally video, because then you can see each other's expression, but at least telephone. So I think that it's easy to fall into, we have a chat line all the time. I see lots of applause for that. It's, just talking to people. That's when you can feel it and hear it. And I think, a good video chat can be just as good as in person in terms of diagnosing a problem. I mean, we all want to get back to some element of in-person, but a video chat is awfully close and good enough in many circumstances. Tahira raised a good point, how leadership's in a pickle. What we've run around having to make these tough choices, and are they mutually exclusive, and they shouldn't, and they should go hand in hand. And I agree with all of that. What we're seeing, and certainly what we saw last year, March and April, when everyone was just like a deer in the headlights, was there wasn't the mental bandwidth to sit down and do a good thinking, a good think session about, okay, how do we deal with the fact that our employees are now working from their dining room table and they can't focus? And meanwhile, we have no revenue coming in. And meanwhile, we have to pivot our whole business because we were a catering company or an events planner. It's a really tricky balance. And I think there are so many times where that, if it's a small employer, that they are thinking about revenue and payroll. How do they make the next payroll? And that doesn't always translate into niceties. What I don't mean to at all undermine. It's not niceties, but some of the things that feel like a luxury in that moment. And yet, if we pause and we had space and you had like a department that could help you, you would realize that is actually really critical to the productivity. But there hasn't been bandwidth. It's been a really distressed time. And so that's why we're getting now we're seeing lots of harassment claims, more and more, and a lot of harassment claims against supervisors and managers because they're unable to keep up with this pace of change. They've got change management issues they're having to roll out. So just a lot more harassment claims are coming through the door now.
I feel like all of our topics today could deserve an hour, and this is one of them. We do have a couple minutes left, and I wanted to get to a couple questions. And again, I'm not giving you a lot of time, but can an employer force an employee to return to work when a lockdown or a stay-at-home order is lifted? And I know it's different in every province, but here in Ontario, we're at stay-at-home orders. Can they force an employee to return to work?
Okay, and yeah, I want to get to the questions, so I'll go fast. It depends. So right now, you can't force anyone into the office unless you're essential service that's open. So no, right now for sure. Once the lockdowns are lifted, the employees will be able to assert their idle rights, their infectious disease emergency leave rights, and those cover pretty broad reasons like childcare or being in a quarantine or being high risk. And they just have to assert it, and it's an unpaid leave. Then they can go off and get EI, but if they qualify. But they can't lose their job because they can't come in. So and as long as idle is in place, then you can't force people to come in. But you do need to explore options if there's a good reason why. Now, if they have no reason why, they just don't want to, they don't like the commute or whatever. Once we get out of the lockdown, I think then there's going to be some conversations where you with a number of conversations can start to take the position they've abandoned the role. But it's high risk to fire people quickly right now. Still, I've been saying that for a year now, but it's high risk.
Still, I want to thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us. I know we didn't get to a couple of questions, but if you're sticking around, I know that we always appreciate your commentary in the chat as well and chiming in. We'll have our networking at the end as well, so maybe some of our guests will connect with you. So thank you again to Lisa, and I see the round of applause already happening. So thanks so much.
Giorgio, can I just make one last sentence? Our firm has a guide for employers in COVID that we update all the time and is free. So just go to our website. I've sent it to you guys, so I think you'll be sending it out by email as well, just in case. But Absolutely. That's a great point to start for all kinds of links. My team has really been diligent at updating it since last spring. So there's, every couple of weeks we're putting out a new version. So that's a good resource.
Very resourceful team. Thank you so much for your support again. It's been great. Thanks so much, Lisa.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Love the emoji reactions. We are now going to move into our breakout session component of the event. You'll have an option. You'll see it happen. You don't have to move anywhere. You'll have 5 options to different rooms for these great sponsors, diving deep into different topics and demoing some services. So we encourage you to join one. You're also entered into a particular draw depending on the room that you enter. So please do join and engage. And after that's done, we'll be back here on the main stage for some comedic relief. So thank you so much again, and we'll see you in the breakout sessions.